Frederick Henry Royce was born in 1863, the son of a miller who fell on hard times. At 10, the boy started work as a newspaper seller. After a variety of jobs in mechanical and electrical engineering, he formed F.H. Royce and Company in 1884.
And gradually the business progressed, and by the turn of the century, they were prospering. And so he looked into the burgeoning world of motor manufacture. He made 3 little 2-cylinder Royce cars. They had the name Royce on it, and they had flat radiators. Now, there was another gentleman down in London, the Honourable Charles Stuart Rolls. Now, he was a man of totally different dimensions from Henry Royce. He was a young aristocrat, Eton, Cambridge, and he was looking for motor cars to sell which were made in Britain. He was very anxious to have a motor car, and preferably one which had his name on it. The aristocrat and the burgeoning, the working man, they just immediately had a sympathetic approach to each other, and it was agreed that Henry would make them and Charlie would sell them. So Henry went so far as to build, would you believe, first of all, a 3-cylinder motor car, then a 4-cylinder car, which was tremendously successful, and this was followed by a 30-horsepower 6-cylinder car. But it was subject to a certain amount of crankshaft vibration, and Henry was not satisfied. So in 1906, he devoted himself entirely to the production of this remarkable motor car, the 4050 Rolls-Royce.
To publicize the car, Claude Johnson, who became the company's first commercial director, had the body of the 13th car made of aluminium and the fittings silver-plated. Hence the name, the Silver Ghost.
Well, I was a student and quite an enthusiast for cars. I was only 19, and 2 friends and I saw this car advertised in Motorsport, and we got it going in 1949, and I was lucky enough just to keep it. I always had somewhere to put it, and I love it. There's no petrol pump, so you have to get air pressure into the petrol tank to push petrol along the pipe to the carburettor. And this is done by, first of all, turning on a valve into the pump position, and then pumping up pressure, which can be, depending how full the tank is, up to about a dozen times by hand. And then you have to go round to the other side of the car, lift the bonnet, and there's no choke as such. The mixture wouldn't be rich enough to start. You put a coin under the low-speed jet. This is something that was never described in the instruction book, but all the old chauffeurs used to know this. And then, with that extra rich mixture set up on the carburettor, turn the engine over 8 times. 8 times, make sure that every cylinder is charged with mixture. And then back to the controls, probably taking the coin out at this stage, and switching the ignition on, fully retarded, and then with luck the engine will start. There's a special type of coil fitted on these early cars called a trembler coil, which provides a continuous stream of sparks. If the engine is in the firing position, it will kick itself off like a steam engine. And once it's running, you then move the controls to give a reasonable tick over, advance the ignition, and we're ready to go. It's difficult with hindsight to realise that in 1906 Rolls-Royce wasn't really very well known, and they did all sorts of things to try and get publicity, going from London to Edinburgh in top gear, for example, on one of the early Ghosts, and then doing in the same car a speed of 78 miles an hour at Brooklands. It seems strange that these speed events were something they wanted to do. It doesn't in the Rolls-Royce image anymore. but it brought the name in front of the public. It doesn't have a huge performance. It's not a sports car. It's not terribly easy to drive in some ways. The gear change is not easy, but it just does everything beautifully. And they're so reliable. They were so beautifully made that mechanical failure is very, very rare on them. So they were outstanding at the time. There's no question about it. They were quite different from any other car, smoother, quieter, and better made. And that's how they got the reputation of being the best car in the world. The very early cars didn't have mascots at all, but I think it became popular to have a mascot on your radiator, and Royce didn't like the fact that people could fit rather heavy, cumbersome things on the front, so he commissioned Charles Sykes, who was a sculptor, to sculpt the Flying Lady. I don't believe my car ever had one. I mean, children come up sometimes and say, it can't be a Rolls-Royce, it hasn't got the Flying Lady on the front. But there we are. I don't think I should bother to have one now.
A girl called Eleanor Thornton was used almost certainly as the model for what became known as the Spirit of Ecstasy. And it does depict the figure of a young woman, arms outstretched, with a mass of tulle wafting in the breeze. And it just encapsulates what Rolls-Royce motoring was all about.
In 1914, the Silver Ghost went to war. Its luxurious body was replaced by armor plate. Some of the armored Silver Ghosts were still in service in the Middle East at the start of World War II.
Rolls was a very good salesman, but at the same time a man of immense imaginative powers. He was trying to persuade Henry Royce to build aero engines around 1908. And Henry was saying, well, what is the point of my building aero engines when they aren't aeroplanes? But he was also mad keen on ballooning and aeronautics generally. And he went out to America and he met the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers took him flying, and from then on he became absolutely obsessed with flying. And his interest in Rolls-Royce motors waned steadily from that moment onwards. In a competition to see how close you could get to land on a white mark on the ground, the plane crashed, and he died, the first Englishman to be killed in an aircraft accident. Charlie Rolls' tragic death traumatized Royce to an extraordinary degree. He looked upon this young man almost as a brother. In 1924, Henry really decided that the end of the road had come for the Ghost. And so he produced what became known as the new Phantom, the Phantom One.
I have seen tomorrow and what comes next. I have come face to face with perfection. I gaze deep into the realms of a new era, feeling impossible elation, hearing silence in its loudest phase. In the unwritten pages of history, I have found my name. I have seen what no one else has ever seen. The future.